Hello, everyone. And we're recording. It's wonderful to see you all. We got more than a dozen of us here. Looks like 16 or so, something like that. I don't know. But we're glad y'all are here. Let me start with prayer. Father, we are we're trying to dig into this Bible that you left us, these notes from your people. And we know your children tell the story, and it's sometimes weird and doesn't make a lot of sense to us, and sometimes is offensive to us. So we want to try to understand. I think most of us, at least, believe this comes from you in some way or another, but that doesn't make it a lot easier right now. In fact, that makes it harder sometimes. So help us to get through this and maybe to learn something about you and the way your Bible has been written, how these books have come about, and about angels, these creatures, I think, that you've made that that do some weird things. So help us to be humble and curious and open-minded and gentle with one another's feelings and always thoughtful of unity and glorifying you. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. Michael Gendy, enter. Okay, so here we go. We've been talking about angels. Actually, we've been talking about all the bizarre creatures that, or whatever, bizarre characters in the Bible. We are going to talk about death, and we're going to talk about demons, and we're going to talk about dragons, and we've talked about deities. I was trying to think about the D's I put in there. But anyway, but we're talking about these supernatural, these heavenly beings, these whatever, they're not people, but they're not God. Maybe there's something in between. And specifically, we've been dealing with the monsters part of them. Like we've been trying to talk about how the monstrous ones, there are some good ones out there, but it's strange how we have a lot of concepts of what is good, like angels are good and demons are bad. But the angels seem to be really kind of bad sometimes, kind of scary. Just it's a little weird. So we've been noticing that. So we talked about cherubim and seraphim and said that these guys are we have this understanding of what they look like and how they act, and they're good guys. They're on God's side, but my goodness, they seem to be like killing machines in many cases. Flying, flaming serpent creatures are the seraphim. The cherubim are portal to what, like they let people go in between portals, it seems like dimensions, go from one realm to another realm, which is just weird. We don't think of the Bible like that. And we've been talking about different kinds of angels. The angel of the Lord, the adversary. Oh my goodness, we spent a lot of time talking about the adversary himself, the Satan. So about 5 lessons, I think, on just that alone. And he keeps coming back up. He's going to come up again today because today's subject is the destroyer. Okay, so the destroyer only shows up in one passage. But there are some other passages that a lot of scholars like to connect with the destroyer, and you might feel inclined to do so as well. So we'll look at a few different passages in there. But the most prominent one of the destroyer, well, you tell me. Where's the destroyer passage?
In Egypt, when he killed all the firstborns.
Say that again, Michael.
In Egypt, when he killed all the firstborn.
That's right. Okay, so here's what's interesting, right? The Satan turns into, right, from what we were dealing with, the Old Testament, and if you're new, right, we always have at least 1 or 2 new people, it seems like. If you're new, like the Satan is what I titled him. It's not me, but scholarship in general. Not Satan. It's not a proper name. It's a job title. So the Satan, the accuser, in that morphs over time. Okay, he evolves, not he himself, but the literary he, right? As he develops, they kind of move from Satan being a functionary of God, doing what God says, to being some malevolent being that is opposed to God. Okay, he's made that morph. The destroyer, who seems to be the one who should have been made that morph, we don't hear a whole lot more about. In fact, I would say maybe we don't hear at all about him. He'd be the obvious choice to become this malevolent being, because man, this dude is scary. Okay? The Satan really doesn't do much of anything to anybody, and I mean, he's he does some things, but and we talked about it. But this destroyer guy is the destroyer of the plagues. Okay, he's the guy who's going to destroy, like Michael said, all of the um, the babies, all of the little ones in Egypt. And if we didn't know better, that is, if our theology didn't tell us something different than the Bible tells us, which it always does, right? We have this theology. We would say God is picking a fight with Pharaoh. I want to look at that a little bit because it's a little bit weird that God seems to be fighting like that. If you think that's a little too strong to say, you'll have to at least say this: God hardens Pharaoh's heart. Right? Hey, Sharon, we can hear your background noise. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So God seems to harden the heart of Pharaoh. He won't let his people go. So we're in Exodus 7. So let's go there. Let's look at it a little bit. Exodus 7 verses, I don't know, like 3 through 5. Start there. Hey, I think there's somebody else with background noise a lot. You still have your microphone on. Can you turn it off? Like a lot of heavy static. Trying to see who. Thank you, whoever that was. Thank you. Exodus 7, 3 through 5. Who wants to do that one? Talk to us. Talk to me.
But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and though I multiply my miraculous signs and wonders in Egypt, he will not listen to you. Then I will lay my hand on Egypt, and with mighty acts of judgment I will bring out my divisions, my people, the Israelites. And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring the Israelites out of it.
Yeah. Okay, so does that sound like God's picking a fight? I mean, you might want to use better language than that. I'm being a little bit maybe sacrilegious. I don't know.
Sounds like God's a little egotistical here. He's like, then they'll know.
That's right. Yeah.
Like, I'm the best.
That's right. Of course, it's not really egotistical if you really are the best, of course, right? Because then, I mean, it's not egotistical to say I'm the best in the world at something that I actually am the best in the world at. That's just facts. But it does sound to us, right, a little bit egotistical. He sounds a little, yeah, I don't. And this is what he's doing. He's making this happen so he can show he's the best, that he's the mightiest. And it becomes really clear if you just keep reading. Now, obviously, we're not going to read 3 or 4 chapters on this, but you can kind of just glance through it as you look at each one of the things that happens, right? Aaron's staff becomes a snake. Then we have each of the different plagues. Maybe if you're not even looking through it, can you remember the different plagues that we have? So just a little test. Tell me what you remember here.
The locust.
Locusts. Good one. Yep.
Nile to blood.
Nile turns to blood. I heard that one.
Frogs.
Frogs, yeah.
Frogs. Yep. Good.
Gnats.
Gnats or lice or whatever those small, whatever. Yeah, we don't know what that Hebrew word is, but it's something like that. Yep.
Darkness.
There's some kind of boils.
Boils. That's right. Yep. Boils on the Egyptians, of course.
Mhm.
Yep.
Sick livestock.
Mm.
Yep. Pestilence and plague or whatever on livestock. Yeah, I heard darkness earlier. I think Riston said darkness. That's like one of the last ones, but yep.
Killing all the fish in the Nile.
Right, from the blood. Yep.
Hail.
Hail. Yeah, hail's one of them. All right,
Flies.
I don't know. Which one? Flies. Yep.
Locusts.
Yep. Locusts. Yeah. All right, so I think we probably named them all, or pretty close to it, right? So when you get to the sixth one I think is boils on the Egyptians, chapter 7. Wait.
9 verse 8.
9 verse 8 is where it is. 9. Yeah, that's the plague of boils.
You're looking for the sixth one, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5. Plague of livestock, 9 is the sixth one.
Yep.
Oh.
Verse 17 of chapter 9 says, "You still set yourself against my people and will not let them go." Right? So he's proving himself, right? He's going to send the worst hailstorm ever that's fallen on them. So the whole idea here is that he is proving his power, and all the way up until the end, even the 9th plague, he's still hardening. God is still hardening Pharaoh's heart. And then all of these plagues to get to that final one that Michael already brought up, right? This 10th plague, where I think in my Facebook post I said we're this indiscriminate killing machine who can't tell the difference apparently between Israelites and Egyptians, except for some magic door stuff that keeps them protected, right? Just goes on this rampage. So who is this killer? Look at verse 12. Chapter 12. 12 verse 13 says, "When I see the blood, or the blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you." We all know that one. "No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt." And then look a little further. Right, so here's my question. Who is this killer that's doing it? Is it God? Who is the one doing it? Because right here
I
he
have a
says,
question.
yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so if he's hardening Pharaoh's heart, God is hardening Pharaoh's heart. And then in verse 17 of chapter 9, he says, "You still set yourself against my people." He's like, well, God's the one who set himself like, but God is he is hardening the heart of, and he's saying to him, "You still set yourself against my people." It's like, no, you didn't set yourself against my people.
Yeah, right.
I hardened your heart. So that's my question. Right. So then I wouldn't, if that's God hardening Pharaoh's heart so that he can do all this stuff, I wouldn't be that perturbed if it was God doing this too, because he would just be being consistent. But
right. Okay. So if you're okay with the first one, it's not hard to be okay with the second one. Right. But you're not okay with either one of them, it sounds like.
Probably not.
Yeah. Because
I mean,
he
have
doesn't
to be, right?
Well, you don't have to be. No. Well, we'll discuss it, of course. But yeah, that's the problem, right? That God is the one doing it. I mean, I would think Pharaoh's answer would be, whoa, what do you mean? I'm setting myself up against you. Like, you did this, right? That would be his argument. I'm fine. They can go, but you keep making my heart hard. Obviously, he's not aware of this, but God is doing this to prove himself mighty. We've just seen that in a couple different passages, right? So he wants to prove himself as awesome. Okay, and now we're getting to these passages, and I want to see if it's, and we'll come back to that, Josh, the whole question of what's going on in this passage. But he says, "The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are." This is 12:13. "And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt." Right? So this is Yahweh speaking. Well, it's somebody narrating for Yahweh, but they're saying that Yahweh said all this stuff. Okay, so
But then look at verse 23.
yes, that's where we're headed next. Exactly. So you think he's going to be the one to do it, except for Jay's reading ahead. Okay, go to verse 23. Someone go ahead and read that. Go ahead, Jay, you're already there.
Okay. For the Lord will pass through to strike down the Egyptians. When he sees the blood on the lintel and the two doorposts, the Lord will pass over that door and will not allow the destroyer to enter your houses to strike you down.
Okay. So who is the one doing the action here? Is it God? Is it the destroyer? Are they one and the same? He's not allowing the destroyer to enter the houses and strike you down. But he's the one who's there, right? When I go through the land to strike down the Egyptians, when I do that, the Lord goes through the land to
It
do
seems
that.
the
He will see
destroyer's
the blood.
actions. Yeah, the destroyer's actions are contingent on Yahweh's permission.
Maybe God is showing up in two persons here.
Oh, yeah. This is Tom's favorite thing. So maybe this is the person of Jesus here. Oh, no. Doesn't say angel of the Lord, but maybe it's Jesus, the angel, the destroyer. I'm not suggesting that. I was just making a joke, but
Yeah, they're
who
two
is this?
different people. They're different people, obviously, because he needs permission. Or
Yeah, he will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses and strike you down.
right.
Yep. All right. So that's it. That's the passage. What the heck do we do with this passage? I mean, this is the only time. It doesn't say angel, does it? It just says he will not permit the destroyer. I mean, that's a cool name. I think Marvel has a destroyer, right?
Now mine has he will not permit his death angel to enter your house.
Oh, a death angel. Okay. Interesting. What's your version there, Trisha?
Oh, you living.
New Living. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I will keep track of that because when we get to these other passages I'm going to show you, I want to see how they change that. If they keep it as death angel or what they do with these other passages. But there is no word malachim here, right? So it's definitely not death angel. It's a destroyer, but it's a fine translation. I mean, they're just trying to do whatever they can with this. Okay, so what do we do with this passage? How do you feel about this?
This, before we go through this, there
Yeah.
appears to be a third person here.
Okay.
If you look at verse 23, it says, "For the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians. And when they sees the blood upon the lintel and the two side posts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not suffer the destroyer to come unto your houses to smite you." So there is the Lord, and there is the destroyer, and there is the storyteller. There is a third person here telling us the story.
Right.
It's not
Yep.
the Lord speaking, saying, "I am going to do this, I'm going to do that." There is a third person saying this,
Yeah. Yep. The narrator.
the narrator.
Yep. Yep. That's right. And that's an important hermeneutical thing to always remember. Right? There's a narrator telling the story. What is the narrator's agenda in telling this story? Sometimes that gets us out of a lot of trouble as long as you're okay. Well, I mean, let's get to that, right?
No,
So-
earlier in the verses that we looked earlier at, he says, "I will pass through and I will do this and I will do that," as if the Lord is speaking. Now there is another person speaking, not the Lord.
Right. Yep. You're absolutely right.
How did that happen?
Ah, well, it's the way stories are told. Yeah. Third
Okay.
person, first person, they jump back and forth.
Okay.
Of course, I mean, what we're dealing with in the Bible is lots of different traditions put together, right? So different authors probably, and then somebody has squeezed these stories together in different ways,
Okay.
which is only helpful if you're okay with the Bible doing stuff like that. If you're okay, then if you don't think of it as one author, as you think of it as a multivocal text, which I think clearly it is for me, but that shouldn't scare us. In fact, it should. For me, it lightens the load a lot to think of it that way. All right, so what do we do with this? What do we do with this passage? Is there a destroyer and is there Yahweh? Are they not the same? How does this make you feel? have a little quick discussion about this. How do you get out of this problem, or do you need to? Do we need to defend God against this kind of destruction?
It's the concept of judgment that applies to all of us at different eras.
Yep.
So God has said that he has special and general revelation, and we all have enough information to make the right decision if we will.
Okay.
And if you make the wrong decision, there's a penalty. So he has every right to do it. It's okay. He is the judge, the jury, but he has apparently has an executioner at work for him.
Yep. Yeah, that's a simple answer, isn't it? I mean, God is always just. What he did here must be just. Done. Even if we don't like it very much, even if we wouldn't go kill lots of people, no matter what they did, God knows a whole lot more, and he's okay with it, so we should be okay with it. That's a perfectly legitimate answer. Most of my pastor friends would probably be perfectly happy there. Yeah, it makes me a little uneasy, but I get it. I hear what you're saying.
I don't like
Is everyone else?
like
What did you say, Suzanne?
that explanation, I understand it, but I don't like it. I don't
Right.
feel like it encapsulates justice as I understand justice by any stretch. Or as other parts of scripture talk about justice.
Yeah, what keeps coming to my mind is Jacob and Esau. And like the idea that, and I don't want to get off this, but just the idea that Jacob I loved, Esau I hated, God. And then Jacob's the one who like surreptitiously steals the blessing. He's like the trickster. And so I'm thinking like, how is this even, my father-in-law, who's not a Christian, he's an agnostic, he's a biologist from Berkeley, and he's reading the Bible. I finally, after 5 years of talking to him about Jesus, he's finally reading the Bible, and he got to that part of the Bible, and he's like, I can't keep reading. So then I gave him James Kugel's, like, how to read the Bible. But I just was like, I don't know how to explain this to him, in a palatable way. But nevertheless, I think one of the things, and I'm going to use anthropomorphic, there's anthropomorphic language here. And so there's either God is both destroyer and Lord, or he's, as Jay was saying, I think that's a possibility, or it's the angel of death, as Trisha was saying, or it's an Augustine's analogy, or excuse me, an Augustine language. Whenever Scripture portrays God in a way that's not what we know him to be, it's always going to be allegory. So this is just pointing to some kind of deeper meaning that we don't necessarily understand, or maybe we can talk about that, but it's not literal at all. Symbolic.
Okay. Yeah, good. Allegory, symbols of something else.
And don't you have to bring in like like Exodus, like, I mean, there's all kinds of debate about who wrote it and when, but there was a purpose that this was written for and an audience it was written to. And so, yeah, I think we have to factor those things as well, as opposed to just saying this is the literal story and how it really happened necessarily.
Excellent. Yeah, which of course gets me excited to share my incredible and awesome diagram once again, because it's been at least 8 weeks since you've seen it probably. But remember, there's a big difference between an event and the author that's telling you about that event, right? So here you are, you're all the way over here, you're the church, or you as an individual, and you're reading the author. You're not reading the event. And the author has an agenda. He's trying to do something. And if you just say, well, the author is God, then you're never going to get very far in trying to understand the agenda, right? You're right. The author is God in some sense, but not in the sense that he handed you a magic book that he like scribbled out on, right? But rather that he moved people to write these things, and his children with all of their faults and all of their misunderstandings of the world and all of their lack of exhaustive understanding of God himself, tell the story the best that they can. And God approves that message. With their childlike scribblings, he says, it's okay. This will work for me. Right? In the same way that you love your 4-year-old's picture of you, right? But you know that is not a very good picture of you. I wonder if God sees it similarly. Like, okay, I see what you're doing here. Well done. You gave me legs, you gave me a face, you gave me a smile. Sometimes I do smile. That's all you got. Like, I don't see any arms on here, but whatever. You don't need that right now. Later on, you'll figure out all the other stuff. So we always want to ask, what is the author doing? The writer, the document, the audience. What's happening here? How are they shaping this story to tell you something about whatever it is that they care about? If that's God, if that's Israel, if that's how much they hate Egypt, if that's, I don't know, how to take care of the world better, right? Everyone has how to be just to the oppressed. What are the different things that they're trying to do? Or just maybe they just want to say, my God's better than your God. What's the best way to say, my God's better than your God, especially in their world, than to say, well, the God's gotten a big fight and Yahweh kicked behind. So then you're still going to have to ask, is the author being fair to what happened in history? That's a different question. It's a very legitimate question, but I have a feeling we're going to come down in different places here. So I think there is some history here. I'm pretty much always convinced that there's a kernel of history, but I don't know how much of that is history. It's ideologically written history at the very least, right? It's motivational history. It's telling you things from the past in order to get you to do something in the future or to understand something now, not necessarily to give you a full representation of what happened here, but to give you a full as full as they can for here, for the future. Does that make sense? This is maybe kind of sophisticated hermeneutics, but we've been doing it for a little while. And it's very important. Most churches don't do this kind of stuff. They just tell you the story and then say, how does the story apply to me? But you've got to take this middle ground. And of course, we always want to say there's another ground. A whole bunch of other interpreters have come through too, like people like the prophets, or like the New Testament authors, or like Augustine, or Aquinas, or Martin Luther, or whoever your pastor is, right? They're all interpreting this as well. And they have something to say about it. And we might say, well, forget Aquinas, Augustine, your pastor. We'll just stick with the canon. Okay, fine. There's still the prophets and there's the New Testament that are inspired. And they're going to say something. Hebrews is going to do something really weird with all of these first chapters of the Bible. Really weird. Okay, so is Paul. He's going to do some stuff. Okay, so back to our problem at hand. I think Suzanne's taken us in a great direction to try and wrestle with what happens, like not necessarily to answer who the destroyer is, but to at least ask why they're telling the story in this way. So what might be an answer to having a destroyer angel so closely yoked with God? Remember, this isn't the first time there's been a closely yoked with God, right? I mean, just look back in the same story at the very beginning when Exodus, when the bush is burning, and it says the angel of the Lord spoke, Yahweh spoke. It kind of goes back and forth. You're not exactly sure what this magic bush is doing. So you don't know who it is. Is it the angel? Is it God? Does the angel speak for God and therefore is God in some sense, an ambassador of God? Or has theology evolved so that somebody went back and got uncomfortable with that being God and so changed it to angel, which happens. We've talked about that before too. Remember, the Bible is very fluid at this stage in its history, right? It
The
changes.
reason why we have a destroyer is because, then God can destroy things without having to have God destroy things and say the angel did it, not God.
Okay.
It's the problem of evil. You know,
All right. So we just create another character that's evil, not God. Even though God said, I will strike you down and that stuff, we just kind of like, just a little bit of distance. We need a little bit more distance. Let's make the actual striker somebody else.
You know, if we look at it Christotelically, we're looking back at chosen people get grace when it comes to death. And so the idea of some kind of blood equaling grace that God's chosen are passed over. So it's like a
Right.
foretelling of the grace for chosen, for his chosen people, for those who, and then the other thing is we don't have a problem with Jesus becoming sin on our behalf so God becomes sin on the cross to defeat sin. It says that, I think, Paul says that, it says that in John 3, and it says that, I think, in Hebrews. I'm not sure if it says it in Hebrews or not, but I know.
Yeah, but the problem is that Yahweh himself, at least in the Old Testament, doesn't seem to be doing that at all. He seems to be defeating sin by crushing it, not crushing himself.
Yes, that's a great point. But I'm trying to get flirt with the idea of
Yahweh
God
doesn't
becoming
do it,
sin,
the
like
destroyer does.
God, yeah, he's becoming evil, or he's not becoming. Look at, I don't want to mix words here, but the idea. I just want to flirt with the idea of God becoming sin on our behalf. God can become destroyer to prove his point, or I don't know. I'm just trying to mess with people, I guess, or get people to answer the question.
At least the author thinks that God can do that, right? Maybe we'll just stick with the literary things. We can ask ourselves whether God really is like that, but the author is trying to do that, at least, to say that God comes and destroys, or that he has a henchman who destroys for him, that he sends, go, do it. And by the way, over the next 4 or 5 weeks, we're going to see like crazy God's henchmen, right? He's got a henchman called Ketev. He's got a henchman called Resheph. Like he has a group of henchmen that come, Hibyon, right? Are these things that you don't know about in the Bible because they try, I mean, honestly, they just cover them up. They do their best to cover them up, but they have their proper names of henchmen of God.
I was in a lecture this last week, and the guy was talking about God's court and God's council, and that they're different. And so I don't understand ancient Near Eastern context very well. I'm learning more about it, but I think the author is engulfed in it, right? And so I think the idea of God being, and I asked him, I went after the lecture, I went up and talked to him. I said, what's the difference between God's court and God's council? Because I wanted him to flesh that out a little bit. Because we talked about the Lord of hosts, like the angel armies, like this is kind of like the idea of his confidants. He said, well, you're not going to like the answer. I said, well, try me. He said, well, God's court, like his personal court, are other gods and other gods of the ancient Near East. And so is God my question then, and I'm not trying to mess with people. I want to try and get people to think like I'm thinking, or I'm not trying to persuade you either, but I want to flesh this question out and to get some kind of solution. Is God around other gods and using them to promote or to is he using the other gods to somehow get his will done, or to orchestrate his will?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not sure I understand, whoever the scholar is, their difference between court and council. So that is an interesting distinction to me, because the divine council is made up of gods. So I don't fully grasp that, but we can come back to that. It might not be relevant to this particular discussion. But yes, there is, at least some authors of the Bible believe that there is a heavenly court, a heavenly council of gods that make decisions, and that Yahweh, of course, is the most powerful of those. And he's well, because it's Israelite writing, right? So as long as it's Israelites, Judahites are writing the story, then Yahweh is going to be the most powerful. And remember, we talked about 1 week how Yahweh comes into power, how he moves into the southern Levant and then becomes, takes the place of El. That's all like the evolution of the literature that we have as it's moving. That doesn't mean God himself becomes more powerful and moves into, I just mean literarily, they discovered these things as time went by, right? That's how things were working. So yes, there's a whole group of gods out there. We've talked about that before. and God might be using them as functionaries of himself, right? So they do certain things. The people of Israel, like the different nations have a certain amount of gods, and the gods are apportioned. The people are apportioned to the gods connected to that. Maybe we should do a whole thing on divine council at some point. But yes, all that is happening. So take me to the destroyer. The destroyer might be one of these gods. Might be what you're trying to get. Okay, that makes good sense. So we got the possibility that this destroyer is one of the functionaries, one of the entourage of God that travels with him to do things. And we know that there are malevolent spirits in God's courtroom, right? Or at least maybe good spirits that do malevolent things, right? Like God says at one point to his courtroom, I need a lying spirit to go down there and lie to put rumors in to lie to this king. And one of the angel beings, spiritual heavenly beings, God says, I'm in, I'll do that. And then he goes and he gives false testimony in order to make it so that, well, it doesn't matter. Like that's the point of it all, right? Okay, so we have a little bit more information. I don't know that we're concluding a whole lot right now, but maybe your mind is filling up with all of these different ideas and synapses might start going, your big chart with your yarn from one pin to the other might start making sense, even though it looks a little bit like you're crazy right now, but little things start to pop in. You had mentioned this too, and I wanted to jump to that for a second. Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated. This is another one of those situations here, right? So in what way is God loved and what way is he hated? So again, if you think about the author cares about Israel, right? Or Judah, depending on who's writing at what time, these states. So of course, Jacob is loved. It's like me as an American saying, if you just humble yourself and pray, then God will come and heal our land. And we all go, yes, he's talking about America because God loves America. Right? I'm just like, okay. I mean, I get it. That's how you'd interpret it, of course, because you're an American. Like, and I'm not even that angry at you for doing that, right? That's just like, of course you would do that. And when they're writing, they're doing the same thing. They are predisposed to love Israel because they are from Israel. And they don't like the Edomites, the Esau guys. Those are bad guys in their mind, or at least not good guys. And so if they're going to tell a story about their ancestors, what are they going to do? They're going to tell it in a certain way. So this is what's happening here. Again, author of Exodus is telling the story in order to get across something. Trying to get across that Yahweh is better than all these other gods. That, yes, of course, it's perfectly okay for God to destroy all of these other countries. Why would anybody think otherwise? We're not from those other countries. When those countries tell those stories, they're going to tell those stories very differently. Their God, Ra, or whoever, right, is going to be angry at this other country and probably going to destroy them. That's how the narratives are told. We used to do this in English class in 7th grade. We would have fiction stories. This was our free verse, just write fiction stories. And we would all write fiction stories about people in the class doing things together. And the people that we were always trying to outdo somebody else, how awesome we were, and how other people fell to their death, or how we killed them, or how we beat up like we were stronger than them. And it was for comic relief. It was, we were just having fun with our friends, but it was to try and show that we were the best. Right? So you'd hear one person's story and then someone else would be getting ready to tell their story and they'd scratch theirs off and make it worse about, that person next. This is how you tell
Or they
stories.
just leave that part out. Like,
yeah.
There's no Egyptian story about a group of slaves, escaping in
That's
Egypt.
right. Yeah, because they mean nothing to them.
We wouldn't write that down if it happened. We'd cover that up.
Yep. Yep. And if all the babies were killed, we'd probably cover that up too. If some god decided to come in and destroy all of our children, yeah, we're probably not going to tell that story either. Now, I don't think this gets us out of the woods here. right? I mean, God is still killing little babies, at least in the literature, that didn't do anything wrong just because their parents, well, actually, not even just their parents, because of politicians, right? Because a king said something and he wanted to prove to that king that he was greater, he killed all the people. I'd be like, God coming in and killing my children because of something Trump did. Be like, that doesn't really seem fair to me.
So
Now I'm going to mourn.
we can't say this is evil or the Satan because it's I have a hard time saying it's evil or the Satan because it's God and God is good. So I'm really having a hard time. I'm going to rule that out. If I'm trying to narrow it down, I'm ruling that out of who the destroyer is. It's somebody who God's using to orchestrate his will.
Right.
It's
Which
not something
only-
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Which doesn't really make us a whole lot more comfortable, does it? I mean, like, it's like a little bit better, but it's like me hiring you, Josh, to go kill somebody. At least I didn't do it, but it's a little better, but not really. I think I'd still go to prison for that because I hired you to do it. But I'm just not persuaded that God did it. So now we're getting into this question of, is this what God really is like? Or is this what the Israelites understood God to be like at this particular time that the author was doing it? And that other narratives, other interpreters need to come by and tell the story again and update it and say it in a much more beautiful way. You mean how we send, yes, weapons to Israel. Exactly. Yeah, good. I'm not going to pull it too soon. Yeah. Okay. So other people are going to come by, like New Testament authors. They're going to clarify about this God. And they're going to talk about this God who comes and takes himself in the person of Jesus and holds out his hands and lets himself be killed instead of killing everybody else when he absolutely could have. Now, we're not done with the problem. That's easy if that's how the story ends, right? If the story in the New Testament ends with a clarification that no, God isn't angry and wrathful and doesn't destroy everybody, but there's plenty in the New Testament that also back up this same story, right? And so we need to look at those too. But before we get to the New Testament passages about the destroying God or the destroying angel, because we've got them coming again, right? Remember the parables that Jesus is going to tell about the angels that come and rip up the wheat, right? And throw it into the fiery furnace where there's gnashing of teeth.
You mean the tares?
Yes. Sorry. Not the wheat.
Keeps the wheat. Yeah. Puts in the
keep the wheat. Don't throw those in there. Right. That was the question. Should we do it? And he said, no, wait till the end, and we'll be able to tell what the wheat and the tares are.
So Jace,
yeah.
How do the later stories, the story about the destroying angel with that comes about with David's census?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Why don't we just move to that one, Jay? Thank you for that beautiful segue. Let's move to Chronicles. Actually, let's do a very quick jaunt into a Psalm 78:49, and then we'll do the Chronicles passage. Okay, so Psalm 78:49. I just want you to see this because it speaks of these, I don't know, a deployment of angels here. And remember, this is poetry. Poetry has a lot more fluidity, a lot more imaginative ways of understanding things, like apocalyptic literature does. But here we have these destroying angels, at least in the New American Standard and the NIV. What versions do you guys have here? Do you see 78:49? NIV says, he unleashed against them his hot anger, his wrath, indignation, and hostility, a band of destroying angels.
Whoa.
Do you guys have something
fierce
different?
angel.
Okay, and New Living Translation is fierce
New Living.
angels. Okay. Fierce angels.
And then later on, it's got a band of destroying angels.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have New Living Translation right here, and it says a band of destroying angels. Okay. So in verse 49. Yep.
Yes, the last sentence.
Yep. Okay. Anybody else have anything else? I've got
Mine says evil angels.
Evil angels. Yeah, there you go. So that is that King James?
I believe so.
That messes up my
I mean-
hypothesis about the evil from earlier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or band of deadly messengers.
Ooh, deadly messengers. Okay. And that's a good translation, messenger instead of angel, right? That's what it means. Angel just means messenger. So deadly, so ones that kill, so destroying or killing, or I don't know, evil is the King James word there. So in each case, someone unloosed, cast this band on this group of people. They seem to be part of the heavenly host, this group of angels. And by the way, when you're reading, if you read Psalm 78, because it's just telling you that same story, right? It's going through the Exodus story. If you look through there, and you'll notice that you don't have the same plagues. One of the plagues changes, just changes. So in case you're ever thinking, well, the Bible speaks univocally throughout the whole thing, you're going to have to deal with that whole lice, gnats question in Psalm 48. You're not going to see it there. Or Psalm 78, sorry. Okay, it's going to change it to a different word completely, which probably means something like grasshoppers or caterpillars or something like that. So I'll let you guys figure out what to do with that. But obviously, between the Exodus and the Psalm, there's a new tradition that's developed, and it's not the same. God didn't send the same thing. So you could say, well, it just means the same thing. I'm just telling you in Hebrew, it doesn't. It's a different thing. So you can trust me, or you can go Google it, but Google competently, as Dan McLean says. All right. So now we'll get to the destroying angel in 1 Chronicles 21 that Jay was taking us to. Okay. Remember the context of 1 Chronicles or of this chapter, right? Verse 1 is going to say Satan, right? The Satan rose up against Israel and incited David to issue a census, right? To count the people, not the people, probably the soldiers. Okay, so this is Satan who's doing that. Remember in Samuel, that it's not Satan, it's God who did that. We talked about that already. We can't go back there. Go back 4 or 5 when we talk about the adversary, and you'll see that there. So either God or Satan as a functionary of God incites David. We talked about it all, but that's the context here. And then we get to verse 12. And verse 12 says, you see it, 3 years of famine, 3 months of being swept away before your enemies with their swords overtaking you, or 3 days of the sword of the Lord, days of plague in the land with the angel of Yahweh ravaging every part of Israel. Now then, decide how I should answer the one who sent me. So basically, remember, David did something wrong. God is coming to David, or Satan is coming, whatever, and saying, you get 3 choices. How do you want to be punished? I don't know if your parents ever did that. Or you can either go get me a Switch. You can have 3 days of no TV. You know, like, this is what he's doing. He's giving him 3 different options as to what he's going to do. Your enemies, being swept away before your enemies with their swords overtaking you. 3 days of the sword of the Lord, days of plague in the land with the angel of the Lord ravaging. Decide which one. And so he makes his decision. Look at verse 15. This is NIV. And God sent an angel to destroy Jerusalem. But as the angel was doing so, the Lord saw it and relented concerning the disaster, and said to the angel who is destroying the people, enough, withdraw your hand. The angel of the Lord was then standing at the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. Okay, so he sent an angel to destroy, and he said to the angel, what was it? Said to the angel who was destroying the people. Okay, so this destroying angel. The New Living, Tricia says something, I think, like said to the death angel.
That's right.
Yep. ESV says the angel who is working destruction. King James, this is Michael's, the angel that destroyed. Legacies, destroying angels, amplified. Just plain old angel in the contemporary English version. The English Revised says destroying angel. Okay, so now we have it, it's converted to an angel. It's not the destroyer, it's the destroying angel. Okay, now we don't have any idea if these are the same two characters or the same two jobs, or, I mean, they both destroy. One's not called an angel in the plague story, right? In the 10 plagues. But he seems to be like the destroyer of the 10th plague, but he's just called an angel now. Very strange. And if you just keep looking at this, like verse 16, David looked up and he saw the angel of the Lord. So again, was called the angel of the Lord now. It goes back and forth, the angel of the Lord, destroying angel, standing between heaven and earth. So it might be a simple thing. Simplest thing is he's just floating, right? Standing between heaven and earth. But it keeps going. It says, with the sword, drawn sword in his hand, extended over Jerusalem. Right? Which is, so it's made scholars, at least as they read this, think that this angel is humongous, right? That he's spanning heaven and earth, and his sword is like covering over all of Jerusalem. Then David and the elders, clothed in sackcloth, fell face down. So he bridges heaven and earth. So David and his gang are here, and they're already in mourning. They're already dressed for it, right? It's gone bad. But now they fall in fear and beg God to spare the people. They're worried already. Now they're worried about God. God doesn't respond. The destroying angel does, commanding a prophet to tell David, if you want to stop the divine plague, then you got to do this particular sacrifice on the land of, if you're reading this, you can see it all there, on the land of Ornan. Ornan freaks out because he's there. He sees the angel. He hides his family. He hides his, like, he's out of there. Like, I'm not hanging out here. He sells the land to David. David quickly runs in and does a sacrifice as he was commanded to do, builds an altar, which is the exact same place that Solomon, so we're told by the historian here, the chronicler, this is the same place that Solomon is going to build the temple where the cherubim sit on the altar of God. All right, so all of that is taking place. It's all this beautiful connection. So this is the first real sacrifice that we hear about in the temple. Where are we now? Great question. We're all in the same one. It's still First Chronicles. First Chronicles, where's my passage here? 21:12. 21, and I passed verse 16, and I just kept telling the story. Just because I didn't want us to have to read the entire thing. Trying to make it short.
So
version.
a message was sent and David responded.
Yep.
That's God ruling the universe across time and space.
Yeah, that's fine. But I hope it's at least a little bit concerning when you see it. If you have an answer to it, that's fine. But like, David will never again offer sacrifices in the tabernacle there because he's afraid of God at this point, or afraid of the angel of the Lord. So chapter 21, verse 30 tells you that he's afraid of this. Satan, he should be, yeah, that's fair, right? Satan triggers all this. The destroying angel is the one who kills everyone. And again, remember, it's strange that Satan is the one who becomes the bad guy in the New Testament, not the destroying angel. And no matter how you look at this, like 70,000 people are killed by the destroying angel because of something David does. So again, like, my whole state is wiped out because of something President Trump does. Or it's not trying to be political. He's just our current president. President Biden does. Right? Collateral damage to make a point to a third party, to prove his power over, Pharaoh, to punish David. Right? That's what's happening here. And you can have an answer to it, but if it doesn't make you uncomfortable for a second, I think we're not being very honest. Right? Because if we are looking at this as Christians, at least, coming back on the text, looking through the cross, this does not look good. I mean, maybe it's the enemies of God. Okay, I guess I'm still a little uncomfortable. I got to be honest with you. But these aren't his enemies. These are his people that he just destroyed 70,000 of in order to prove his point, in order to punish David. It's pretty bad that David himself picked that, but whatever. So I'll just let that sit there for a second. The problem is, well, I mean, the problem's already sufficient at this point, right? But it seems to me like these angels that we like to look at don't look an awful lot like Clarence from It's a Wonderful Life, right? Like, I like that one better, I gotta say. He's nice, and he's helping. He even got his wings. It's a wonderful life for sure. Okay, little bell rang, but I feel like it can't get any worse than this, right? I mean, this should be pretty troubling. 70,000 people that God loves killed. Except for maybe you can hear the narrator in the background. It gets worse, right? Like, it's not over. And to me, this might be the worst, but 185,000 Assyrians are killed as well. So look at this Second Kings passage. 2 Kings 19:35, or you don't even need to look at it if you don't want to, but you'll probably want to mark it down so you can study it later and get freaked out like I've been getting freaked out for the last several months. So Hezekiah is praying for God to show his strength. Hezekiah is the king of Israel. And the angel of the Lord comes and shows his strength by killing 185,000 Assyrians, right in their camp. We don't hear anything about the angel or how he does it. All we know is that a lot of dead bodies are left behind. That's it. So could this be the destroying angel? I don't know. Why does God destroy like this? I mean, the Assyrian king, right? The reason that he did it is because the Assyrian king mocked Hezekiah's God, saying that your God doesn't have enough power to do this. And so God was like, oh yeah, you don't think I got enough power? Watch this. Right? And 185,000 people. I mean, that seems fair. God, they said he couldn't protect his people, and he did. He showed himself. And if you're on the good side of this is a very encouraging story, isn't it? It's why we sing in church, the God of angel armies is always on our side, right? And we just like, yes, you're on our side, which means you're against the other ones. Maybe. I mean, I hope you're not singing that personally, but
we're on his side.
What?
We're on his side. You gotta
right.
Everything should point back to God.
Agreed. Yep.
And Fauci did worse than this to all the world with COVID.
Man.
All right. We moved into politics. I'm not going to argue about that one. I try to keep that.
I was marrying a couple on Saturday, and Friday we had the rehearsal dinner, and that got brought up at dinner, and I just stayed quiet. I was like, oh my God, he's back. We have to talk about this. I have another hypothesis that prior to the death of Jesus on the cross, angelic beings, spiritual beings are able to go in and out of heaven. And so this is we see this happening, whether that be the Satan in Job, right? Or these angels right here. And somewhere I think in Revelation it talks about that no longer being the case after the cross. That it's implicit that Satan is expelled out of heaven, and he roams around like a lion waiting for someone to devour. Like this is so like the idea of these beings no longer having authority to after Jesus. That's my I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. It's my answer. It's my final answer.
Okay. I would probably disagree with your interpretation of what Revelation is doing there. That's an after the cross event. So I think Revelation is telling the story up to the cross and giving us the cross story. So I just don't think it's a future story. Maybe future up for the next, dozen years or something like that, but not our future story. So I think, Satan has, again, it's literature, right? There's an evolution of the literature not of the being himself. So it's not that Satan has then been kept out of heaven before, and like, right? We got the same kind of concept in both stories where Satan, or not just Satan, but any of these angelic beings, they have to go through the cherubim in order to get to their places, right? So even in Revelation, in the Apocalypse, the cherubim have to say, "Come, come," before the angels will come and pour out their bowls or their vials and to their trumpets. They always have to do that in order for them to affect and destroy the earth. So it's an interesting theory. I think we could play with it if you wanted to, but all I want to do is focus on the difference between the literature and the actual, the reality of what's happening in this. So we've got a bunch of literature. There's at least, I have two more very quick stories that I could just tell you so we can end up with this part here. Remember the angel blocking Balaam? Remember we talked about him already? This angel who got in the way has a sword, doesn't seem to be super huge like the one we just talked about, but and also kind of invisible to everybody except for Balaam maybe. And also remember this. I said this at that point, but I've thought about it more as the destroying angel seems to chase after. He's running after you. It's just a different story. So he's trying to. It seems like he's trying to kill Balaam with a sword, right? Remember that? And the donkey keeps messing up. But not only is he trying to kill him, we have like 3 different stories in that Balaam thing where Balaam gets to a certain point and the angel comes and blocks his way. And then he gets to another point and the angel comes and blocks his way. And it gets to another point, like he's on this journey and the angel seems to keep coming after him and showing up before him. And if it's not for the donkey, he would have been killed. So he's pursuing him. He's running after him, even though he's getting ahead of him. So that's that one story that's going to show up in Numbers. And then Acts 12, 21 through 23, I'll just read it real quick. On the appointed day, Herod, wearing his royal robe, sat on his throne and delivered a public address to the people. They shouted, "This is the voice of a God, not of man." Immediately, because Herod did not give praise to God, rather selfishly took that as adoration for himself, an angel of the Lord struck him down, and he was eaten by worms, and he died. So again, another angel of the Lord who destroyed one of these opponents of God. It's always interesting that he was eaten by worms, and then he died, not he died and was eaten by worms. Because you're going to find out. What was that, Josh?
It's got to be symbolic. Like, I thought there's got to be there's symbolic language. It's like, it doesn't happen. That's not the right order. It just doesn't sound right.
Except for if you read Josephus, and you go back and look at this particular story, you're going to find out that he actually, according to Josephus, he dies 5 days later in that story. So it's the angel struck him down, but he dies 5 days later from extreme abdominal pain. So apparently something happens to him, right? Worms are eating his guts. So some bacteria, something happened in his abdomen that killed him. And they said, this is because the angel of the Lord struck him down. So they give you the solution, the reasoning. They tell you what happened. They tell you that he was struck by the destroyer or by this angel of the Lord. Anyway, you get the idea. I think I made it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I know the Acts passage is different because it's a different language, but like I missed a large portion of this, putting my kids to bed. But the first passage, the Exodus one, and the Chronicles, and the one you're just mentioning in, with Balaam or whatever.
Yeah.
In Numbers. Are those all like the words that's talking about this destroyer, this angel? Are they all the same or are they different in Hebrew?
No. Well, so when it speaks of the angel, the destroyer by itself, right, that word and the word the angel destroyed, right? It doesn't call him the destroyer, but an angel who destroyed. Those 2 words are the same. In all the other passages, it doesn't use that word destroyed specifically. It's just talking about him destroying in different language. So yeah. So if we're talking about the destroyer, there's only one passage, that first passage. And then I've just tried to tie in some other beings that may be the same being, maybe not, Maybe they, maybe all of these are just a host of things. And, now your job is to be destroyer. Now your job is to be destroyer. Now your job is to be. And so there's not a destroyer angel. It's just, that's your task right now to destroy. So we don't have this information. That's why most of this Bible study that we've been doing for the last, 10 weeks or something like that is, hey, let's read this passage. And what are you getting from it? Because it's just not telling us those things. And what we like to do, and this has been the whole point of all this, is we like to have a nice, neat system. Angel of the Lord in this category, destroyer is here. Yeah, angel of destruction is here. That's a different thing. And a malachim is different than an angelach. Like we have all these categories. The Bible that's systematic theology. It's just created in order to make things easier. But the Bible doesn't do any of that stuff for us. So if you look, you could Google right now, angel categories, and you'll get a nice little list. And I'm just telling you, that stuff's made up. Like most of the things we hear in churches about categories.
So is the destroyer mentioned in the first passage, the Exodus passage, is the word angel used associated with that? Or is it just destroyer? Just destroyer.
Just the destroyer. Yeah.
Jace, I have a question.
Okay.
Is it possible that back in those days there was some kind of disease like the plague or typhoid or cholera that caused all these massive dead people, and then the writer would, instead of, he didn't have the explanation to tell us why all these people died, so he gave credit to God or to an angel or to somebody saying our God did this, when in fact it was just a disease.
Absolutely. Right. So Joshua's people are coming through, right, heading into Jericho. They cross across the Jordan River, and it says that God split the waters for them. But later on, we find out that there was actually a fall up in Adam, in a city up there, and it stopped the water. Well, what happened? They're trying to make a connection between Joshua crossing the Jordan, just like Moses split the Red Sea. That's a theological history telling, right? It's kind of historical. Something happened in the water, I think, maybe. But they want to connect it to Moses. Joshua is the new Moses. And Moses is the new Noah, because Noah went through the water too and escaped through. This is hugely important. They're telling you these theological stories to get you somewhere. The author has a plan in how he shapes his narrative. So I think that's a brilliant. Yeah, that's exactly right, Michael. So then we still would have the question, what actually happened? But we're not going to be able to answer that with any kind of certainty. All we can do is say, here's what the Bible's doing. Here's what the authors are. We think, here's what the authors are doing. Later on, other interpreters are going to do something different with that same text. And then other interpreters are going to go and do that. Because they all know that God's people are just telling their story. God's children just tell their story in the way that they tell it. And it's up for grabs as to how they're going to do it in the future. Maybe not completely up for grabs, right? Like if I ask you the number between 6 and 8, you're going to say 7, but I could also say it's 7.2 and 7.4, 6.9. Like there's a lot of wrong answers. There's also an awful lot of right answers. And people seem that like they're okay with doing that. In fact, I feel like the only way that theology continues forward is if we do that. If we reinterpret it for a new world, if we reframe it, we renegotiate it, we reimagine it. Right? That was the whole last series that I did on reimagining scripture, reimagining the story. And we have to do that. Which makes it very hard for me to say something like, your interpretation's wrong. Like, I still do it. But what I usually mean is, I'm pretty sure that's not what that author was trying to do with it. But it could be. Even for me, like Genesis 6, the very clear interpretation of Genesis 6 is these gods come down out of heaven and marry these women. I think later interpreters have grabbed hold of that, maybe even in the Bible, and have reinterpreted that as historical kings, like, and have done that. So it might be that all the different options are actually accurate in the Bible because they went a different direction than the original author went. I think the Song of Songs is a book about erotic love poetry. Okay, but I think the reason it got included in the Old Testament is not that. I think it's because people saw it in a new way as God's love story of Israel. And the only reason that people like, New Testament people or later than that, Holden, is because they saw that as an analogy of Jesus and his church. So which is the right answer? The one that it was originally written for? The one that was in the canon, that it got brought into the canon for? The one who interpreted it later on during the prophets? The New Testament's interpretation of it? That's been my whole point through all of this, is that this changes. The way we understand Scripture changes, and it has to. And it's beautiful. It's still all pointing to something. I think it's still leading us to Jesus.
I hate to disagree with you, Jace, but there is nothing in that book that anything about Jesus or Jesus and his love for the church. It is erotica from beginning to end. And if it was up to me, I know it's not up to me. If it was up to me, I would not have included it in the canon.
Yeah, right. Yep.
Good word, Michael.
I think, Michael, even if you're 100% right, that's exactly why I would include it in the canon, but whatever. Because I think God is a God who loves sex and all the stuff that goes along with it. So,
All right, so if we
he
put
created
ourselves, Dr. Broadhurst, if we put ourselves into Jacob, like when Jacob I loved, Esau I hated, if we're putting ourselves into this, if we are Israel, if we imagine ourselves being Israel, first priority, yeah, then we can see ourselves not being destroyed. There's everlasting life. Like, we're not going to be destroyed. We're going to go through the water. We're going to have the angel pass over. Like, this is the beauty of the narrative, that we are it's fluid. We're included. So we should be imagining ourselves as God's chosen, or we are part of God's kingdom, or through Jesus.
Yeah.
I think that this is beautiful and a great thing, and it's good news, I think.
Yep. Anybody else have any last minute comments? You may leave more confused today than you did when you came in. But even if that's the case, you still took steps forward. So it's okay to be confused, because the more that you learn, the harder it is to, you're getting stuff. You are getting it, believe it or not. But it is messing up some of your theology. And so you're going to feel like other stuff's drifting away. If you buy it, if this conversation is helpful to you, if you go, yeah, I think you got something here, Jace, other things are going to start to fall away and they're going to start to hurt. These pains, these growing pains, are very real. And they threaten sometimes to grab hold of your faith and throw it out. Don't let that happen. Right? There is beauty on the other side of this. If you feel a little bit like, I think I just got abused. Like, somehow you just took away my Jesus, the beauty of the Bible. Please don't ever think that. Like, I'm a pastor. I love my congregation. I love Jesus, all that stuff. I mean, I'm 100% in on this Jesus following stuff. Okay. But there are some hurdles. But I think once you get there and you see the Bible differently, I think even the gospel itself becomes more beautiful, which I didn't think was possible before, because it was pretty beautiful before. Anyway, pastoral word, be careful when you listen to me.
I think you should have started with that, not end with that.
Yeah. No, then everybody would have hung up. Yeah, I don't want that to happen. Oh, I want people to keep listening. And by the way, I'm not saying anything profound or scary. I'm just reading the scholars and telling you things that they're saying. This is not like, whoa, Jason's got some kind of new, not at all. and just pick up a scholarly book. I'm just trying to bring it down to people that want to hear it and honestly just don't have time to read all the ridiculous academic books or aren't able to. They're just too difficult. I'm just trying to bring it down into an easier, more palatable way. So, all right, that's it. Thanks for coming.